Good day, everyone. This is Abrar Indawi, and this is the continuation of Ms. Guro's report. So please allow me to reiterate what our topic all about. So again, this is the strategies used in teaching literature, which is research based. Now, this time I'm going to share it to you about teaching short stories in a classroom. I have choose a case study of the use of short stories in a junior secondary ESL classroom in Hong Kong by Chi Chong Robi Yang in the year 2009. Now, the purpose of the study is that short stories are considered as good resources that can be used in language classroom, according to Weller 2001. Thanks that short stories are a natural part of a child's life. Good short stories can draw the child's attention, can also stimulate his or her imagination and his or her desire to use the language. One more important advantage of the use of short stories suggested by Lane 1997 is that in classes where there are children who are not motivated by the foreign language and who are low achievers, a story, if it is well chosen, can change their attitude to the language. Moving on to the research questions of the study. First, will will the students become more interested in English with the use of short stories? Second, will the students become more confident in using English with the use of different activities in the pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading stages? As for the methodology of the study, the participants of this study were a class of Form 1 students as age bracket of 12 to 14 in the Band 3 secondary school in Hong Kong. There were 20 students in the class with 16 males and 4 females. In this study, two storybooks were chosen for investigation. The first one is called Post Honey Tree, which was adapted by Isabel Gaines and was published by Disney Press in New York in 1998. So it is a short story which has 34 pages for the whole book, with many attractive and colorful pictures accompanying the content. Now, this is a story where very simple but interesting. It is about Winnie the Pooh found honey in the hole of a tree. The other storybook is called Pinocchio, which is a famous tale retold by Linda M. Jennings and was published by Ladybird Books in 1993. It is also a short story because there are only 24 pages for the whole book with colorful illustrations in each page. It is about an old wood carver who wanted to have his own child, and so he made a wood puppet called the Pinocchio. I think you're already familiar with this. Now, since it is a famous tale, it is expected that most of the students have heard or read the story before in Chinese. Late 1998 suggests that if the students already know the story in Chinese, they will be eager to know about the story in English. So moving on to the approach used in this study, there's only one approach used by the researcher, which is the narrative approach. I have read also this one study. He used three approaches, which is the modern approaches of teaching a short story, the stylistic analysis of approach, and the learner-centered approach. So that's what he used. But this study I've choose, she only used one approach. So the method of presenting the two stories in the students in this study was the narrative approach. Yeah, again, what I've said, the narrative approach is used in this study as serves as a strategy by teaching short stories in a ESL classroom. Now, like for example, the storytelling. It is considered that this can help students understand the story easily through varying the voice and the use of different body language and develop other listening skills. What's more, by telling students the stories, teacher can adjust the stories a little in terms of the language used to meet the level of the students. Moving on to the method of the data collection, the method that word used in this study included the quantitative and qualitative method. In quantitative methods, the pre and post test questionnaires were used, whereas in qualitative method, class observations and semi-structured group interview were done. Now, there are also benefits in teaching short stories in a classroom. First, here we have the exposure. If the language used in a short story is within the level of the students, it is a good source of comprehensible input, according to Willis 1996, cited in One Reads 2003. As for comprehensible input, it refers to something that students can understand, that can also be achieved in several ways. For example, by a teacher reading aloud, where students reading silently and the like. When a teacher reads aloud a story, he or she can facilitate students' understanding by using a variety of ways, such as using some body language. Students will benefit if they are exposed to a large amount of comprehensible input, where a language acquisition will occur incidentally if they are supplied with a large quantities of interesting stories that they can understand, because a wide variety of natural language rich in the vocabulary and grammar complexity is provided in story. Another, we have the motivation. The story itself is its content is interesting, that can motivate students and make them involved in the class. Now, Godwin and Perkins also suggest three major benefits of stories in terms of personal, linguistic, and conceptual development of children. Now, as for the personal development, stories enable children to develop their own feelings and emotions by identifying with short stories, characters, and a plot. In other words, it means that short stories can offer a children with an imaginary world created by the language that children can enter and enjoy. Moving on to the linguistic development of a children, wherein using stories can expose students to different language patterns. For example, the creative use of language to express imagery and new vocabulary can be learned in a natural context. Moving on to the conceptual development of the children, where a children can be, introduced with some new ideas and knowledge through stories, which can facilitate their conceptual development. Yeah, they are also introduced with the cultural traditions and values of the society they live. One other benefit of using stories suggested by Lane in 1997 is that for those students who are not motivated to learn the foreign language, or the low achievers of that language wherein stories, if they are carefully chosen, then probably can change their attitude towards the language, as they will think that learning language is interesting and not difficult as they previously think. Now, in teaching short stories, you have to choose stories that are for language learning. Now, teachers should be careful when they choose stories for their students, because it emphasizes a good story can hold children's attention. It can also stimulate their imagination and also their desire to use the language. So when the teachers choose stories, they should consider the content of the stories and its language used. The content, according to Morgan and Reinvolcri in 1983, stressed that the content of our story is the major criterion to be considered when we choose stories for language teaching. Now, the content of a story is considered to be good if it is involves interesting characters, a clear plot, and ending which can make students feel surprised. Also, the values and attitude conveyed in the story should be appropriate to children. Now, as for the language used, a story is a good if it contains a repetition with the same language patterns, or what we call the parallelism in a natural context. It should contain a simple language so that students can understand easily. The story can include some new language, but that new language should not be too much affect students' understanding. And what most importantly is the illustrations, of course. Apart from the considering the content and the language used, The stories should be chosen if are full of illustrations. This is particularly important for low motivated learners, this what you call low achievers, because all children love interesting pictures and they are attracted by the colorful pictures. So students can also understand the story easily if it is well illustrated with pictures. As for the discussion of the major findings, regarding the first research question, will the students become more interested in English with the use of short stories? Now, the data collected in the questionnaires and the semi-structured interviews of the present study were contradictory. The result of the post-test questionnaire showed that after the use of short stories, there were still more than half of the students indicated that they do not like English. There were also nearly half of the students indicated that they dislike having English lessons. However, in the group interview conducted after the use of short stories for 4 lessons, it was found that the students in general had rather positive views about English. Only one of them expressed that he does not like English. This contradiction, if the result, may probably be explained by the weaknesses of the questionnaire design. With the availability of the neutral option, the participants who did not complete the questionnaire seriously might just select neutral in each item, and so the result will become inaccurate. So this phenomenon is evident in item 1 of the pre-test questionnaires, in which more than half of the students, which is the 58%, responded neutral. If this is really the case, then the results obtained in the questionnaires could not truly reflect the students' real attitude towards English, either before or after the use of the short stories. As for conclusion, short stories are considered as a good resources that can be used for language teaching, and the storytelling approach is believed to help students understand the story easily. A story, if it is well chosen, can change the attitude of children who are not motivated or low achievers in the foreign language. The findings of the present study has shown that using short stories will not automatically make students become more interested in English language. The stories are interesting and the language use meets the level of the students. The story can include some new vocabulary, but that should not be too much to make the students lose the reading interest. Regarding storytelling, the investigated class of the students in general favored this approach as it helped them understand the stories easily, though their confidence in using English could not be boosted within a short period of time. So I think that would be all. Thank you for listening.